Hello and welcome to the Community Pharmacy Telephone Interpreting Service Pilot Overview slides. This is being pre-recorded so that you can watch this at any time and you can share it with all members of your pharmacy team. I'm Ruth, I'm Chief Executive Officer at Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire, and I'm going to take you through today an overview of the pilot, how to access the interpretation service, and also how to claim the pilot funding. So why is interpretation needed? We know that in the UK we have a proportion of people who live here who are immigrants and whose primary language isn't English. And we know that in community pharmacy we often rely on friends or family or unqualified interpreters, often people in the pharmacy team, but that's really not considered to be good practice as an interpretation because it can lead to errors and misunderstanding, and also if it's done through a family member or friends it can also be biased. So why have we set up a telephone interpretation pilot? The Integrated Care Board, so in West Yorkshire, it's the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership, but actually NHC and I, as many of us will currently know that, wants to reduce inequalities by increasing the access to services for all our population. So NHC and I have provided funding for both to pay for the interpretation, but also to pay for the pilot, just so we can test this out in community pharmacies. It has been recognised that to date community pharmacies just had to muddle through or use friends and family to translate, and often doesn't have the option to access the languages that all of our patients need us to translate in. The pharmaceutical needs assessment, they are a document which are produced every 3 years and which market entry is based on, includes a survey around services, and what came back quite as a strong message in the P&As, which are out to consultation at the moment, is that a significant number of pharmacies highlighted the need for formal translation services. So we know this is a need that you've identified yourself in pharmacy, but also one that, as I say, we want to address with inequalities. The pilot's been targeted on specific pharmacies that routinely support Bevan House in Bradford, York Street in Leeds, and the White House in Kirklees. These are GP practices which have a very high proportion of migrant patients, and also that deal with asylum seekers. So we know that in those areas there is a higher than usual proportion of people who have a requirement to access services other than in English. The pilot is being done to capture the kind of the impact we can have by making community pharmacy, enabling community pharmacy to translate and offer more services. And we want to kind of see that impact. We want to see how often it's used, and any negatives to that, any positives to that. We will then use, hopefully use the outcome of the pilot to access the ongoing access for all pharmacies across the whole of West Yorkshire. So this is around really just testing something before hopefully it goes to a wider footprint. So what's expected of you as a community pharmacy team taking part in the pilot? The interpretation service to be used is LanguageLine. It's a very well recognised international interpretation service. And you're being asked to use LanguageLine really for any interaction that you have with your patients where you think that it's going to be more accessible for them to have that in a language other than English. It can be for anything from over-the-counter advice, advice on a prescription, even if that's missing items, to things like delivering services like the new medicine service or the discharge medicine service. And yeah, as I say, it's LanguageLine that you'll be using, and really it's for you. As long as it's a pharmacy related conversation, it's for you to determine when you think that's going to be helpful for your conversation with your patient. So how do you use LanguageLine? So the first thing to get to the bottom of is which language is needed. Now, one of the resources, they're on our website, and they'll also, links will be sent to the pharmacies once the pilot agreement's been signed, a language identification form. Now this, you can see a picture of it on the screen now. This lists the main languages which we know have been accessed historically. So it's not got everything on there, but it's got the main ones. So one of the things you could do is show that to the patient. But LanguageLine actually have over 180 languages available. So if you call them up and ask for another language, they should be able to offer that for you. Again, on the website, under the translation service page, we do have a list of the languages that LanguageLine provide. Not all of them, but it is a bigger list than the one that you can see on screen. Important to note that LanguageLine is also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so it doesn't matter when you need to use them for your pharmacy opening hours. Even if you've got extended opening hours, you can use LanguageLine. So how do you actually use it? So there is a one-page guide. Again, this is on our website, and it will be sent to the pharmacy email addresses once the pharmacy signed up to the pilot. And the guide covers the three main kind of routes that you'll need to use in a telephone interpreter. I think for community pharmacy, the main one's going to be when the client is with you. So that's going to be for us most of the time. We want to just pick up the phone because somebody's coming to ask for something or to come to collect the prescription, and we need the interpretation there and then. But there's also options if you want to make an outgoing client call, so you know the person that you're going to call needs to have the conversation translated. And indeed, there's one for handling incoming calls as well. Now, to access LanguageLine, you will need a client ID. This will be given to the pharmacy when the pilot agreement's signed. Now, it'll go in the body of the email, but we also will send you an updated one-page guide with the client ID printed on it. So what you can do is you can actually print out a couple of copies, maybe leave one by the phone, and maybe leave one by the in the consultation room, for example, so that whenever you need to access interpretation services, hopefully it'll be to hand. Now, there's a video that I've been has been shared with me around using LanguageLine. It is American, but it does outline the kind of the key points that you need to use. So I'm going to now stop sharing my slides and attempt to share the YouTube video with you.
Chasing that A and want to save time? Grammarly makes editing one click simple.
I do apologise, the outputs have just come up. Right, there, bear with me. I apologise, but it doesn't seem to be giving me a potential to share the screen with you. Let's do it this way here. Okay, so hopefully you can see that and hear this now.
Welcome to LanguageLine Solutions on-demand interpreting. Quickly and easily connect to a professional interpreter in more than 240 languages from any phone, anytime, anywhere. When helping a limited English speaker and you need language assistance, simply follow these easy steps. It's fast, reliable, and secure. First, identify the language. Ask basic questions like, what language do you speak? What country are you from? Or have the limited English speaker point to their preferred language on the language ID guide or desktop display. If you still need help, connect to LanguageLine and press 0 or say help. Connecting to an interpreter is simple. If your organization has a customized process, follow the instructions in your quick reference guide. Dial the toll-free number or press the red button on the dual handset phone. Enter your client identification number or access code, or press the white button. Select the language by following the prompts. Input any data required by your organization. You will be connected to the interpreter, and they will state their name and number for your records. Place the call on speakerphone. Share the dual handset or pass the handset back and forth. And finally, begin the interpreting session. If you've chosen the wrong language, ask the interpreter to reconnect you to the correct language. By following these important tips, you can work successfully with an interpreter to ensure clear, concise, and effective communication. Introduce yourself and the limited English speaker. Then brief the interpreter about the call. Speak directly to the limited English speaker, not the interpreter. This is the most effective way to communicate. Speak in a normal tone and use short sentences. Allow the interpreter time to interpret. Avoid jargon like slang and technical terms. Remember, everything you say will be interpreted. Be patient and respectful. The interpreter may ask for clarification to ensure accuracy. And lastly, check for understanding. By connecting with a professional interpreter to bridge language barriers and build relationships, you can be more efficient, productive, and deliver an outstanding experience in any language. Again, here's a quick reference to help make each session a successful one. LanguageLine. Understanding is empowering.
Sorry, we seem to have more adverts on there. There we go. So I hope you found that helpful and useful to kind of have that overview. I'm now going to find my slides again for you. So the thing I didn't actually discuss with you with client ID, there's two other things you do need to give. So there's the ID number, which you'll get around LanguageLine, and it's a code. It's not too long, but it'll be on the form. But also the pharmacy ODS code and your name. So hopefully you'll know your ODS code. That's the code that starts with an F. The presentation, so that the YouTube video went through most of this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. And I will say, if anybody's there frantically scribbling, this is all, and I'll show you the link at the end, this is all available in a single document, which again, you can print out and keep somewhere handy or share with your teams, so you're all aware of the kind of the key kind of top tips of working with interpreters. So they talked about briefly the interpreter, speaking direct to the patient, and that's really important. Try to speak naturally, not louder, and at your normal pace. It asked that you didn't talk in shorter sentences. That's because it's quite hard to interpret huge, big, long things. And the interpreter may check the understanding with yourselves to make sure they've got that right before they then interpret. Ask if the limited English speaker understands, so it could be really good to check through the interpreter, that somebody has understood what you've asked them to interpret for you, so that you can be confident they're going to go away with the right information. Don't ask for the interpreter's opinion. Their interpreter's job is just to interpret, so you mustn't ask for their opinion. You just need to say what you want to be interpreted. And as the video said, everything you say will be interpreted. So please, try not to be interrupted by colleagues, because if you say something to a colleague, that will be interpreted, which could cause confusion. Jargon and technical terms, we heard about avoiding those, and the length of interpretation session. So just worth bearing in mind that not all things can be interpreted to the same length. So the interpretation might take twice as long if you just did it in English, and that could be because the terms need explaining in a different way. So please don't interrupt the interpreter while they are doing the interpreting. If you happen to be reading a script or reading something to a patient you're asking to be interpreted, do bear in mind that we can talk differently when reading through a script and rattle through things. So do make sure again that you take your pauses and that you do read things at a pace which can be effectively understood by both. The interpreters will be familiar with the culture and customs of the limited English speaker, so they might identify a point of cultural issues. So that could be really helpful, worthwhile knowing that could happen. And closing the call, the interpreter will be there until you are very clear you want to close the call, that'll be when you then disconnect from the call, and then hopefully the patient will go with better understanding. So as I said, this is all available on working with interpreters in the healthcare setting briefing. It's on our website, and it is also being emailed to all pharmacies as part of the pilot. So you should be able to easily get hold of that to refresh yourself. So the other thing that you need to be aware of is recording the use of LanguageLine. Now this is part of the pilot. If we went to having LanguageLine access as a normal thing, community pharmacy, you wouldn't be asked to record this. But this is how we're going to get the outcomes from enabling that access, knowing the impacts it has on you, the outcomes it has on patients. So again, I'm going to stop sharing and pull up the file microns program and just talk you through the things that have to be recorded. I'm just logging to farm outcomes now. There, so here's the translation service. Now, mine will look slightly different to yours because I'm not accredited as a pharmacy would be. As you can see, it says preview, and that's just because we see a slightly different version because we write the programs rather than actually just entering data, but all the inputs will be exactly the same. So many of you will be familiar with farm outcomes, but you can, we do recommend you record on the day you do it, but you can backdate things if you need to do it, and then put the time that you used it using the 24-hour clock. So for example, I did something at 4:25, I would put the time in there. We want to know the patient's registered practice, so it might be Bevan House. You can type in, I've spelled wrong, Bevan House, so you can find Bevan Healthcare in Bradford if that's what they're using. You can search for postcode, address, the practice code. Important to note, you'll see next to here, if the patient isn't registered, which is a distinct possibility for some of these patients, you can put in not reg. It doesn't mean you can't access interpretation, it just means you just need to record they haven't got registered practice. We ask that you then take the services that you provided in the pharmacy. We've chunked these into essential services, advanced services, and locally commissioned services. So for example, if you're dealing with a prescription query or a missing item or something to do with dispensing, you could just take dispensing medicines. Or if you were doing something around the discharge medicine service, we've got the advanced services there, and we do hope that this access to interpretation will enable you to do things like CPCS, which probably could be a bit of an issue for you because they're a bit too complex to do without interpretation, unless you're, other than English. And the locally commissioned services, so the ones we know. Now, we do know that not everybody has access to all these services, but what we've done is we have put them there. So for example, if you're a Leeds pharmacy, you might do the Leeds inhaler service and the ENT service. We are aware that that's not available in Bradford. And as you can see, if you do a couple of services, which would be great, then you can then click a couple of them. That's what indeed you've done. Before I scroll further down, I just want to point out on the left-hand side, you'll see pilot documents. Now, I'm not going to click through because I've got the suspicion I'll lose my link with you and sharing my screen, but you can go to the service specification. We've got accessing a telephone interpreter, so that'll give you the guide for how to access them. There's the language identification poster, so actually you could click that up onto the screen to show it to the patient to get them to choose their language. And the last document I spoke about, working with interpreters in a healthcare setting. So going back to the services that are provided, hopefully you can actually just tick that. If it's something different, put it in other. We do ask you only use other if it really isn't covered by another one, because it does help with audit. But if we see lots of others going in with a rationale, we might then add something to the tick box. So do keep an eye, we might show the tick boxes if needed. What language is required? So we've auto-populated the main ones that we know are used. So it might be Russian, for example, but if it isn't on the list, for Ukrainian, then it's put none of the above, and you just type the language that you're going to, that you're accessing there. The next set of questions really are to try and capture how easy it was for you to access the language. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how easy was it? What was it? So if it's really not easy at all, 10 is difficult to access, and 0 was very easy to use. So yeah, did you find it useful? Any additional comments? So did you find it took a while to get connected, or any issues you had, or anything positive? Please put those in there too. We want to capture the impact of using LanguageLine on time. So, how many minutes did it take? So that's just free text for you to undertake the interaction. Now we know that nothing takes no time in pharmacy, so it might have already taken 6 minutes to do the over-counter consultation with somebody if it had been in English. So we want to assess the impact that has. So if you think it took a considerably much longer time than it would normally do, you might give it an 8 out of the 10. Or if actually you think it really didn't take that much longer than just having a conversation in English, you might just put it as a 1. So for each of your interactions from 1 to 10. Again, there's a free text there for you to add, what were the additional impacts. So you might say, well, it took me longer, but I was able to offer better advice. or I was able to offer them a new medicine service, which I wouldn't have been able to do. So again, it's about us capturing what impact does it have both on you and also on your patients. Which is this question here around, you know, additional benefits, yes or no. So if you say yes, we asked you for the comments so that it's it did offer additional benefits. If it didn't really, then we won't ask you for that feedback. Last one's for any other comments of patient feedback. This is a bit of a capture all, just in case we haven't got any other questions. If you could put those things in there, please do not put with any of the pharmacoms service recording any patient details in this free text, because the free text is copied across straight through. Patient details that go into pharmacoms services where you actually are asked to put patient details in are anonymised. They aren't anonymised in that their comments, so really important you don't put those in there. Once you're finished, you then just it says test values here. That's because mine's not the actual live service, but you'll just submit it, and that will submit it for each patient. And we do ask that for every person you use translation for, you submit that value. So I'm now going to stop share and go back to my slides. And talk about the month-end process. I'm not going to show you this on farm outcomes because it's really what you can see on screen is what is captured. So every month, at the end of the month, at the same time you do your prescription bundle, we ask that you then put a monthly participation claim form in. It's really important you do this because if you don't make this claim, you won't get your £50. So you need to put the data on, and that'll go, you know, for each patient that'll go in the background. But this confirms that you are you either have used LanguageLine and you've used translation, or indeed if you haven't. Now, if you haven't used it, you are still eligible to pay claim your £50 a month for participation in the pilot. But we will ask you why you didn't use that, because we know the pharmacies that we've chosen are ones where the population has, as I said before, got a high proportion of people whose first language is not English. So we do expect there to be some use. We don't really know how often it could be used. You know, it might be once a week, it might be, you know, a couple of times a month, but it could be every day. So that's fine. Use it, you know, when you, I say, for when you need it to help a patient conversation. So please don't forget to claim. So, bit about the pilot. It'll run from the 1st of July until December, so that's just 6 months. Pharmacies will be paid £50 per month. That's whether you use a translation service or not. However, the service will be, so the pilot will be reviewed on a regular basis. So that'll be more, you know, every few weeks we'll look at the data. But at 3 months, there will be a more formal review with NHS England. Pharmacies that haven't got an activity may be removed from the pilot. I outlined before that the pilot's going to be evaluated. There may well be some additional evaluation questions that want to be asked. So if you're invited to be part of that, we know there's a budget there for you to get an additional £50 for taking part in any additional evaluation. Important to note that Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire have been funded to support the pilot by NHS England. So as part of that, we're very likely to send you emails to share information on good practice, or we might indeed call you to discuss, you know, how you're getting on with using LanguageLine, or maybe discuss why you haven't used it, and just to kind of understand the barriers and the advantages of community pharmacy and our patients through that kind of data that we gather. So I think that is the quick run through of the interpretation and translation pilot. I hope it's answered some of your questions, and I hope you feel that, you know, you can see it's quite simple to access LanguageLine, and you've got the tools there, which so it's really easy for whoever, so they don't have to listen to this, but for whoever just to kind of use those kind of 3 printed sheets, how to access LanguageLine, the list of languages that are available, and then that top tips, and then put it onto farm outcomes, and hopefully you find it helpful and you find that it means you can give a better service and more comprehensive offer to those people whose first language isn't English. Thank you very much for your time and listening. If you do have any further questions, please email to info@cpwy.org and we'll direct them to the right member of the team. Take care and thanks.